Greetings, sentient beings, and welcome back to the part 2 of the KSP Interstellar Extended Beam Power Compendium. I'm going to talk about relays today, all about the relays. So what we've got here are some phased array transceivers. You got your microwave transducer up there. You got your little static round transceivers, little relay dishes that are super cool. That one transmits and receives from the top and the sides. This one's all about the sides, but you can stack stuff on top of it. Pretty cool, right? So this thing's not it's super realistic. It's a little overkill. It's a little bit too much, and of course, how on earth would you get it into orbit? I mean, look at it. How are you going to launch it? But the general idea, once I fix my OCD right here, is that you could set the bottom sections to activate receiver for relay, and then the top one could be activated as the relay itself, so it could receive from all sides and then just transmit back. To break this thing down, it's pretty simple. Just kind of pull it apart there. You got your core, you got your control, so that's going to be probe control and RTG and maneuverability. You set your bottom one there. I scaled this one up to 5 meters. As far as the actual wavelength that you choose, remember X-band versus D-band versus W-band versus K-band has different atmospheric absorptions and transmission strengths across distances. So you want to use shorter wavelengths for distance without air and longer wavelengths for transmitting through atmosphere. Put the top one on. That one's only at 375, so smaller. And then I think I put this one to D-band because it's got the 2.2 millimeter, so it's good for long distance as far as microwave goes, long distance transmission. Yeah, if you wanted to use something for long distance, you really should use like infrared for the local Kerbin system, and maybe like ultraviolet for long distance, X-rays once you're going interstellar, that sort of thing. So I just kind of rotated these around, just built one part. It was a truss and a radiator and a dish, and then I kind of duplicated it and kind of got it centered there around the edges, scaled it up, and then used the rotate tools to align them, and then just took the exact same part, flipped it over, and put it on top, and then boom, it looks cool. And it would work. It totally works. I got one of these similar, something that looks a little more like that, in orbit, and it is totally working just fine, with the bottom part set to receive and the top as the relay. Set to receive a link receiver for relay. There's a difference. And I'll show you that difference. There are two types of relays that you can build: an active relay and a passive relay. This is a passive relay, and Freethinker's going to yell at me about the radiator placement, because that's not a good idea. But I mean, maybe I have technology that allows me to absorb from one into the other and generate just a little bit more electricity. Who knows? Who knows? I have the technology. Otherwise, you might want to just kind of have radiators poking out the sides there. Something, just have radiator arms like trusses or something. But yeah, this would be a passive relay. It doesn't have any power production of its own, save for the RTG inside the computer core to keep the lights on. But other types of relays that we might explore, let's see. Oh yeah, that's the one that I actually have up in orbit. It uses that ball instead of a dish. That way, and if you switch it to the one that's inline, you can actually do something that resembles launching it into space. Let's see, what else do we got here? This is another passive relay. I didn't like it too much in practice, but something like that would work, where you have the middle portion set to receive and the outer portion set to relay, or you could have the outer portion set to receive relay and the middle portions to act as the relays. This is a active transmitter, or active relay. So it absorbs using those big giant dishes. It's got radiators because it's actually going to be beaming power instead of just reflecting it, and we're going to use the transducer up there to make that happen. So those big gold looking dishes, they can absorb microwaves, so that's cool. So they're going to receive instead of set or activate receiver for relay. These are just going to be activate receiver, and then that top portion is going to transmit whatever it receives. So let's go ahead and build a little something different. This is the thermal inline receiver there. And you have a lot of different options on how you can use this. And I had to get some pointers from Freethinker there to the different things, because it wasn't immediately obvious to me. I mean, it looked like it was, but I couldn't figure out how to make the parts fit together. So I'm just going to show you real quick a few different configurations that this thing can use. So it's going to receive thermal energy, turn it into electricity using that generator, and then it's going to beam it out using the transducer. The radiators are just there to show you that you need radiators, not so much that those are the ones you want to use. Obviously, in space, you're going to want to use graphene, and bigger ones and more ones, depending on what you're actually doing. Here you can use those gold dishes to amplify what your thermal receiver is receiving. And you can scale it up and make it pretty big, and it's surface attached, so you can put it almost anywhere. But here's the thing, you actually have to attach it somehow to the actual thermal receiver. So where I have it there, it's not going to work. Better idea, if you're having trouble placing it, is use one of those. That, when attached to the thermal receiver, will collect and add to the thermal receiver's thermal power, and give it much, much better coverage and range. So you could use something like this to receive power, turn it into electricity, beam it off, and it would be an active relay. Maybe reconfigure it a little bit depending on which way you're going to point it to get the best use out of it. But it's going to be really lossy. Okay, you're not going to have very high efficiency doing something like this when converting it. However, it is an option for converting it. If that's all you got, I mean, it'll do something, just not the most ideal configuration. Okay? The better thing to use this for is propulsion. Okay? So power generation, super lossy, kind of tricky, but doable, but just not ideal. Just because you can do it doesn't mean you should. Yeah, take that as you will. But definitely what you would want to use something like this for is propulsion. So let's set up a little propulsion dealio. If I can reconfigure these real quick. And just to let you know, if the audio is out of time, I've recorded this in its entirety with my microphone muted, and didn't realize it until I had edited it all together, and then so I'm going back and like dubbing over my voice. So it's probably going to sound a little out of place, but I will do my best to line it up. So yeah, you throw a thermal rocket on the bottom of your thermal inline receiver, and then you put those little antenna thingies there to collect and point it behind the rocket, so that when you're flying up, when you launch, initially you're going to have that beam power below you, eventually it's going to be behind you, and when it's behind you, you're not going to get a lot of reception. So I would do, the Ender's Game, dive down towards the planet while still, close to the atmosphere, or using the over-Earth effect to maximize my circularization. But in this, you could actually just do a normal-looking launch, and that will collect behind. Instead of having to tilt an angle, you can have a lot more coverage and still get thrust out of that thruster without doing odd maneuvers. So yeah, use this for propulsion, and you will have a light and efficient vessel. I suppose I should name this thing something Lilliput. Yeah, sure. We have hydrolocks in that tank. I know I zoomed kind of through that. It's at 2 times recording speed. We put hydrolocks, liquid hydrogen, liquid oxygen, in that particular tank. So that's what it's going to be burning out of that thermal rocket. Sorry about the loading screen here. I really should have edited those out while I was at it. Alright, now we're not going to actually launch this. We're just going to cheat it into orbit, because today I'm just focusing on relays. So we're going to throw this thing out to Minmus. And, assuming, we had actually done a launch, we got out there, we're in orbit of Minmus, and that's how far we are from the planet, we're facing it. We just kind of go ahead and face, and turning our receiver on, we see we're only 30% facing, because we're not, we're looking at it, but the inline part is not actually facing the transmitter. So we're not really worried about electricity right now, just thermal power. You can see we have multiple spots, Agatha, Echo 2, and Echo 3 are in range, giving us different amounts of power and different bandwidths. And as far as just the inline receiver, we're only getting about 2.5 megawatts total of power, and that's not enough. Now if we turn on the receiver dish and realize that I pointed it in an odd angle, you'll see that as soon as it turns around, it comes in range. Boom, there we go. Now we're in range of the exact same satellites and transmitters. Now our thermal power management display didn't change much because it's still tracking the inline receiver, but notice down here with the mirror dishes, we get a lot more available power. Still not much because it's weak microwaves being transmitted across a long distance, so not a lot of power is going to actually get there. But you can see that we are getting, up in the 30 or 40 range, 31, 34, 31 megawatts of thermal power is what we're actually getting to that engine, as opposed to the 3 or 2.5 megawatts that the inline receiver thinks it's getting. So be sure to use those receiver interfaces to really get an idea of what you're doing, but just click on the thing to see what it's actually doing individually. Just right click and look at its menu. It'll tell you how much thermal power it's got. Alright, so let's do a little testy-roo here, if I can organize some parts. Oh, actually, looks like I didn't even realize. Yeah, we already turned that on. So, we saw there that, with just the inline receiver, we only had about half a kilonewton of thrust, and then we got up to about 16 once we opened up the receiver dish. So those receiver dishes definitely add quite a bit of oomph to your build. Now we're going to go back to Kerbin here, and in the last video we launched a bunch of Klaus type craft, and they're not going to act as relays, but they are going to act as receivers for me to test out different relay networks. So really, I should have attached that dish to the inline receiver instead of having it separated, but c'est la vie. Okay, so first thing we see, we are connected to Echo 2, which is right there, and it is receiving at 25% efficiency because we're only 47% facing, and then we're going to actually try something different. We're going to point at Echo 1. Now here's what we got here. Echo is a relay. It's a passive relay, so it's passed through, whereas Echo 2 is an active relay. It's receiving and then retransmitting. So it's like a conversion station, except it's converting from microwaves to microwaves. But what they'll look like when you pull this thing up is a relay that's just a passive relay will show up under relay name, and it'll show you the transmitter that it's relaying. Okay, whereas a active relay will show up as an actual transmitter. Now notice 100% facing is reported by the Agatha transmitters, but we're not actually pointed at Agatha, we're pointed at Echo, which is relaying Agatha. So we have a 100% facing to Echo, not to Agatha, but since we're 100% facing Echo, and Echo's got a 100% facing on Agatha, it shows us that we're 100% facing. And we're still not getting that much. 5% is our best efficiency on the W band, 3.1 millimeters. 25 millimeters, the X band is our lowest efficiency because it just loses power over distance. Okay. X band is 25 millimeters is 2.5 centimeters, which I think is slightly larger than what's in your microwave oven at home. Just to give you an idea of what's going on there. It loses a lot of power over distance very quickly through atmosphere. You notice microwaves don't actually leak out of your microwave oven, despite the fears. You can stand in front of them perfectly well, because ain't nothing of significance getting to you from inside that microwave oven. Anyway, I digress. We're going to switch over to Echo here real quick. As you can see, it's a passive transmitter, or a passive relay rather. We just point the receiving end towards source, and then the top end there is relaying whatever it receives back. We can just kind of point it at the thing down there at Kerbin, close to KSC. We just kind of point it there, and it gets all the good juice. And also, I can receive from multiple angles, like above and below the equator as well. Since it has reaction wheels, it can aim in space when it's unloaded, so you don't have to worry about having swivels or anything like that on there. Though you could use persistent rotation if you want to make things more realistic. But nonetheless, if it's unloaded, it will adjust itself as far as aiming, so you don't have to worry about that. On the ground, you want something that's got something that works a little different, but right here, that'll work just fine. Okay. And it actually does work. You saw that it was perfectly well relaying Agatha and any other relays that it comes in contact with. It'll relay that power right back out. Not very efficiently, not very much. 3.1 gigawatts from one of those stations, is barely making it its way around the planet, but some of that does make it. I did these in different wavelengths because I wanted to see network efficiency and absorption between the different dishes and the different transmission strengths and wavelengths and stuff like that. And I quickly noticed that it's going to take a lot of studying, so I just recommend, to get your own idea and to do your own research, set up multiple power stations with multiple wavelengths and then see how well they do with each transmitter and receiver and such to determine what you want to use in your space program. But this is the interface that you would use to do it. Okay, so let me take a look here. Klaus is there, and you see, okay, yeah, Echo 2. Let's go to Echo 2. All right, Echo 2, this is an active relay. You probably saw it on the power management display, but this is an active relay. So it receives using the thermal inline receiver connected to a thermal generator and some radiators, and then it retransmits using the transducer on top. I have it throttled down so that it's only transmitting 10% of what it's receiving. Just kind of wanted to put a baseline there. 10% of what it's actually getting is what it's transmitting. And I could have gone bigger, but I kind of put this in the wrong spot, so it's facing the radiator, so that doesn't quite work. I should have turned it over and pointed it the other way. But nonetheless, if you just turn that around, it would work even better. But since it's round, it's pretty much got perfect facing as it travels around in an low equatorial orbit. It's always going to have the same facing, but as it gets more and more in range of, closer to the transmitters as it comes around the planet, your power is going to go up, and you can see the heat's also going to go up because it's starting to collect a lot more and transmit a lot more because it's just doing a static 10% of whatever it's getting. So when it's not receiving a lot of power, it's not going to be transmitting a lot. When it is receiving a lot of power, it's going to start transmitting more, which is going to produce more heat from that thing over there. And you can scale this up and have multiples of these constantly keeping each other connected, which would be good for producing full power coverage of your planet. Not so much good for launching interplanetary flights, but would be great for making sure that everyone has satellite TV and electricity. Power the homes across your planet using a power station in one spot for all your power stations, and then just relays sending it everywhere else. This was that other active relay that you saw that I didn't quite adjust the radiators and things, so stuff starts smashing together. Would definitely want to do something a little more realistic than this. But basically, if you didn't like those other designs, you could have the big giant dishes collecting power and swiveling on all multiple angles and axes and radiating heat out the back and transmitting microwaves out the front. So it's receiving from that other active relay from Echo 2 and then bouncing that power back. It's getting about 100 megawatts that it's able to actually retransmit about 110 megawatts. And you can see, if you can see that faint green line, that's not only our communications connection, but that's also where the power's coming from Agatha to Echo 2 over to Echo 3. Not bad, right? Echo 2 is transmitting, the 300 some megawatts of power, and then we're getting about 110 that we can retransmit around to the other side of the planet. And of course, scaling, radiators, technology level, all that sort of thing will improve your efficiencies. You're never going to have perfect efficiency. Entropy will always win, but generally that's the game. Chase down the most efficient way to direct that power. And whether you use an active transmitter or an active relay or a passive relay is going to depend on what you're really trying to do. As you can see there, we're beaming it out of the atmosphere to a satellite and then to another satellite, and it's kind of passing through the atmosphere on its second limb, if you can see right there. And it's still being received. Now let's go to Klaus, which is even further around the planet. It's one of three Klauses. Klausi? Klausi? Claes? I don't know, what's the plural of Klaus? Yeah, so if you follow that little green line, you can see we're basically going to the opposite end of the planet with this power. So let's face our closest satellite and turn on our receiver and see how much power we're getting. We are getting, it's 58 megawatts is available to us, which is small, and you can't do much with 58 megawatts of thermal power. Remember, that's thermal power, not electricity. You'd still have to convert that to electricity if you wanted to use it. But from Kerbal Space Center up into orbit and then around the planet following those green lines, you can see, we're bouncing it to the opposite end of the planet, more or less, and getting about 59 megawatts total from our efforts using those dish receivers right there. Obviously, it's not going to do much for us, but it's just a proof of concept. It's showing you what these things do and how you might use them, and then you scale it up to something more realistic, and actually you would be able to do work with these. Not going to be able to do much work with, looks like we just bumped up to 61 megawatts as we get better facing, but or as the other satellites get better facing, but if we had a more robust and efficient and aligned network, the power levels would be more constant, would be more efficient if we used better parts. Alright, so something else. You could, of course, launch a nuclear reactor up into space and do things that way, although at low levels in the tech tree, you really want to cool your nuclear reactors with water. In the previous video, I showed you one design that got into the water, but its radiators weren't the best. So Freethinker suggested using... Oh, yeah, that was just me giving you a blurb of how the transducer will track a craft as it flies overhead, whereas the static phased array ones won't actually track. They have trouble with angles when they're on the ground. Now, what I was saying before, if you want to launch something into the water, a better idea is to give it a little bit more stable of a platform. So if I kind of do that, and also those round radiators are much better at, the convection radiators are much better when submerged in water than any other radiator. So you'd want to, maybe do something along these lines. I don't know what engines and all he was using, and I don't have a lot of things unlocked. But you might put ore tanks there to balance it, or you might just put another reactor, like another reactor generator combo, right there in the middle, and then use those big round radiators as balance support pylons for your engines, as well as they'll dunk into the water and submerge, and you'll be nice and cool when transmitting. Okay, kind of get rid of those because you don't need all that. You don't really that's what you need right there. That's wonderful. This will, that won't launch because reasons. You'll need some fuel pipes on there, better engine, something like that, but more or less that's the idea. Alrighty, let's see, what else can we do with these things? That's a relay. That's a passive relay right there. That'll work. Not very well, not very good, but if you just had something like this, beaming directly to like some colony on Minmus or something like that was receiving from a very powerful thing, but you only needed a little bit of power at its destination point, that might work. Sure. This would be a much better choice. So somehow in my tech tree, I have unlocked this part before I've unlocked its functionality. It works just fine in sandbox mode, but at this exact point in my tech tree, until I unlock more power, I can't actually use that as a receiver. But it does transmit, and it does have the science experiment attached to it. This is your much better choice there when you want to use those phased array transceivers. It's the big deployable one because it's just much larger surface area. You do also, of course, have the option of using the itty-bitty guys. These are radial attach surface mount transceivers, just like the other microwave dishes there. You can put them all over, stack them up, scale them up, arrange them in beautiful shapes. I see. Isn't that beautiful? You tell me. I think these things are wonderful. So yeah, a lot of different ideas, and by the way, that'll work. Link the top ones for relay, put the bottom one to a relay, you're good to go, or vice versa. And it'll work in that it will do its function. It just won't do it very well because it's not very efficient. You want to really get your notebook out and do the maths on spot sizes and wavelengths and distances and that sort of thing. Or you can just do what I do and eyeball it and launch a gazillion different launches and test them all out and see what works. However your research and development program runs is up to you. But I hope this gives you some ideas on things that you can do with relays, because relays are super fun and super useful. And yeah, any other questions or comments? I'm going to have more videos of these coming up, and definitely thanks for watching. Throw questions, comments, criticisms down in the comments, and be sure to like and subscribe and share with your friends. Stay frosty, keep flying. Peace.